Hey everyone, welcome to Clickheads. I'm Eddie the Chump, and today we're going to be talking about the evolving meta of Valorant and how certain changes at the top level of play will start affecting the rest of us in ranked play moving forward. This is in response to two things. Firstly, Hiko released his 1.0 patch tier list video, which very closely resembled Frido's from last week with a few changes, and the fact that the best team in North America right now, TSM, have started to drop traditional must-pick agents like Sage and Cypher depending on the map that they're playing. Infamously dropping Sage against T1 in the winners and grand finals of the recent Ignition event on Ascent in favour of running double smokes with Brim and Omen. Now at the beginning here, let's just take a look at TSM's coach explaining why they dropped Sage on Ascent from a recent interview with ESPN eSports.
And on Ascent, we really wanted to try to have two smokers available, so Omen and Brimstone. In order to do that, we had to drop one of those core people, and Sage was the most likely one. Cypher's still really strong. Sage is extremely strong too, but we thought on T side we would get the advantage by having double smokes. So we've been practicing that for a few weeks. Sage is still super essential on maps like Split. I think you're crazy if you don't run a Sage in mid.
So it isn't really a case of Sage suddenly being trash, but more a case of dropping her suited what TSM wanted to do on T side, which was to take two sets of smokes for executes and crucially, although this went unsaid but is reasonable to suppose, for shutting down incredibly strong op play that can dominate that map if you allow it. T1 didn't take two controllers and had Scar on Sage, and you could argue Wardell's op was much more of a dominant force across the map because of that. In fact, the power of op play in general has led to a rise in Omen play across the board at the top level, but we'll get into that a bit later. TSM are also the best at utilising Phoenix at that level, with drones shining on that agent. Frido actually has a breakdown video coming talking about drones Phoenix, and without spoiling it, grouping up behind and or in smokes and Phoenix flashing out is a core part of how they try and make their T-side work. So them taking two sets of smokes with Brim and Omen is worth dropping the value that Sage offers because it better suits what they're trying to do, which is win as many T rounds as possible. One other thing TSM's coach said in his interview was that they're always testing and trying out different comps to perform certain functions and that they're trying to develop their own meta. I would go further actually and say that TSM is leading the meta, coming up with strategies and ways of playing that go beyond the default pick Sage, Cypher and Brim and two others and defend well. They look like an actual team, and I found it very illuminating when Taylor explained that with this game there are no trailblazers in terms of style to copy and adapt from like there was in CS. He gives the Astralis example from Counter-Strike in that they developed a repeatable style that others could learn from. In Valorant, there's no one like that because it's so new. Actually, I would say there is, and they're called TSM. They're doing things with their agent picks that a lot of other teams wouldn't be trying, and they're winning because of it. This brings me back to Hiko's recent tier list, which is very accurate. I'm not going to dispute what he has to say. He's also very careful to mention the tier list is for top tier organised play, which obviously has differences to how we all experience the game. But there's a bit of a problem, and it's nothing to do with Hiko. His understanding of the game is absolutely not in question. The problem is with tier lists in general. Tier lists, by their nature, cannot take into account a multitude of contexts, level of play, level of organisation, or even map selection. And this is where I think we will legitimately see changes to what's meta in the future. As I've outlined, dropping Sage seems like a dumb thing to do if you look at her value in isolation, res, healing, wall, etc. That's why she's still rated as S tier by many people, including us. But there will be times where something else is even more S tier than her value. On Ascent, you could argue, the power of the op is actually what determines what you should play. Omen reached A tier on Hiko's tier list specifically because he's stronger against ops than Brim is, which also explains his high pick rate at that top level. Omen being able to put larger smokes down from across the map much further than Brim can is a real strength against op angles. The smokes being hollow doesn't matter if you're just trying to block off a line of sight. Brim's strength is that he can smoke multiple things at once, which you can then explode into. But if he's just blocking op lanes so you can just get some early space, he won't have any left for an execute. Omen smokes regenerate, and he gives your team a powerful flash as well. TSM, by dropping Sage, are showing that picking an agent because their utility is S tier in a generalized way is kind of missing the point. At the very top levels, it's not about covering all your bases in that loose way. Take Sage for slows, walls and healing. Take Cypher because traps, and Brim for executes. No. TSM are picking agents for a specific reason or a locked down set of variables depending on the context of each map. This is to try and enable their specific method of winning T rounds, their game plan suited to their roster, not a default idea of how you should play. This is where Valorant will go in the future, in my opinion, with more tailored team comps to what a specific team wants to do on a specific map, not what the common accepted strategy is game-wide. However, this Sageless wonderland TSM are building on Ascent in the pro scene doesn't necessarily translate into what we all play every day, and it's part of our job on this channel to make the war in heaven relatable to you. So what does it all mean? Well, here's one thing that's for certain. The power of the op is undeniable, even in ranked. When teams on defense can rack up economy and start to have multiple ops, it can get really oppressive, with a lot of players calling the weapon overpowered. There's many community figures talking about this right now, from Mendo to Hiko infamously declaring that there isn't enough utility in the game to effectively deal with great op play. I was watching Asu last night, as I am wont to do, and he had a match that was just dominated by multiple ops for both teams, racking up huge defender rounds, because without proper planning or utility, they can just destroy the unprepared. This is one of the reasons why Omen is so good in solo queue, and in a way, might be one of the most meta solo queue agents. If we compare him to, say, Breach, Omen just has so much more to offer in terms of anti-op utility. His smokes can be placed from virtually anywhere across the map, they're very large, which means they're very good at obscuring op lines of sight, and they regenerate. His flash too, although limited by range, can be extraordinarily strong. What does Breach have against an op? His stun is much better understood and avoidable now, and his flash, because it needs a surface to detonate off, can do little against an op if it's in the wrong place. Just like Hiko said in his tier list video, Breach is still a good agent, but the meta has just passed him by, with even Riot Morello saying that his stats were buns. If we can say that op play is really going to start dominating public matches, as some of you would argue that it already does, then what do the traditional big S tier agents do for you? Sage, Cypher and Brim are great in the general sense, but I wouldn't say that they're especially good against an op. Brim smokes are good, but he has to be close to them to place them well. Take Split on A site as an example. From a safe position, Brim can't even properly smoke CT or elbow, two very common op spots, but Omen can. Cypher can put traps down to cross lines of sight, but there are plenty of common spots where there would be a gap on a single cage use. He can peek with his camera, which does help you avoid dying instantly, but the rest of his utility won't really help you. And Sage is best when people are trying to rush her or take space quickly. That is not what an op does traditionally. It can hold space once taken, and you can work op peaks on offense for sure. Just watch Wardell stream if you want tips on how to do that, but Sage isn't great at negating any of that. Even Reyna, who universally and correctly gets assessed as bottom tier, despite being my personal favourite agent, is better against an op arguably than these so-called S tier agents. Her flash Leer is really good at peaking op players, as they can't just avoid it if placed correctly. So what's meta really does depend on what you're trying to achieve. In solo queue, Jett can be outrageous if the player playing her is gifted enough. Ninja recently tweeted about picking what's meta, specifically Sage, just because players think they need her in a team. Pro tip for any competitive game, don't play a meta champ / agent just because it's the meta. Play your best, most comfortable agent / champion, and that will deliver better results. Example, don't pick Sage in Valorant because we don't have a Sage. A bad Sage doesn't do anything. Now, no matter what you think about Ninja, there is truth to what he says here, and it's something we've said ourselves in videos discussing agent strength and solo queue play. But there are times where other meta forces are at work beyond agents. The op being very strong is just one example of that. One other is, what map are you even playing? If you're playing Split, then having a Sage to defend mid is absolutely something you should be thinking about roster-wise. I think a few things are known quantities in ranked. You will have to play against ops, and you will have to play against Cypher in most of your ranked matches. Who does Hiko rate in his tier list as being strong against those things I just mentioned? Omen, Sova and Raze. Oh, that's 3 of the 5 agents we recommended in our solo queue guide. I wonder if that's in any way related. Anyway, aside from saying I told you so, like the smug git that I can be, the reality is that the meta is something that's both shaped by facts, like how good abilities or utility is in a practical sense, and the perception of how all those things interact. When a team like TSM drops Sage in a specific place for a specific reason to play their game and it works, a lot of people will look at that and take take oversimplistic analysis away from it. Soon people will be saying in ranked, it's Ascent, we don't need a Sage, and that might be true in some cases, but there's still multitudes of reasons why you might want one. Are the randoms on the other team going to take extra smokes, bunch up behind them, and explode out with Phoenix flashes? Probably not. That's way too much teamwork for most ranked matches. I can't even get Liam to wait for an Omen smoke to bloom on Cat before he peeks it and wonders why he's dead to an AWP. And he's like my brother, we speak and play literally every day. I imagine you guys have similar experiences too, and that's why talking about what's good and what's not in a simplistic way is difficult. It's because there are actually two metas happening at the same time. What the pros do, we learn, but much slower, and how much we learn depends on how good we are or want to be, and on top of that, what the pros do might only work when it's your job to play as cohesively as possible as a unit. So are we actually out of the Sage meta where she's no longer a must pick? No, of course not. She's still amazing in a lot of contexts, but that doesn't mean that you have to pick her either. Tier lists are both an amazing thing and a terrible thing. They're good because they're fun and people like them, and it also fosters deeper understanding of how the game works for a lot of people. That's why we do them, and that's why Hiko does them. They're not by any means evil. But they can be bad because they never tell the whole story. The truth is much more complicated than Sage is S tier, Omen is A tier, Sage is better. Tier lists are shorthand, and there's one context where shorthand just isn't good enough, and that's when you want to know the full story. And that's about it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the content on this channel, please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you get notified when we upload. Also, please check out our Facebook stream. We're no-lifing Valorant over there, and it would be great to see some of you in the chat. Until next time.